provide free, confidential, legal advocacy. So I often get the question, well, how much is this going to cost? We are free. We do not have an income guideline. Our only requirement is that the person we represent is the individual with the disability. So we are here to advocate on behalf of individuals with disabilities, which is sometimes a little frustrating for parents, because you all come to us and we represent your child, but as the parent, you know, you safeguard those rights. But thank you. So I just want to clarify that. We represent at the P&A from the time the individual is here to all ages. There's no age requirement. Oops, I got name, no phone number, no name.
Oh, that's the lady in the green just handed it to you.
I'm sorry.
Or was it you?
That was me.
You?
Oh, was it?
I'm sorry.
I just need your name and phone number, where we can contact you now during. Okay, well, I am out of tickets. So, if anyone else does a survey, I owe you tickets, but they're at booth 300. So, all right, so let's start, because it is a minute before, and I tend to talk a lot. I am different than some of the presenters here on my team. I like it to be interactive. So I want you to ask your questions that are timely at the time we're going through the topic, and you don't have to hold them for the end. Other presenters I know prefer to do that, so they make sure that they can get through all the material. I will do my best to get through all the material, but I'm here to educate you all. So if I'm going to just sit up here, or stand up here rather, and drone on, and it's really not relevant to you, then I've wasted your time. So I would like questions that are relevant to you. We are going to go through, I guess I should get through that. Oh, hi, I'm Ann Siegel.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. I am the Director of Advocacy, Education, and Outreach, which is a mouthful. But my team handles special education, post-secondary education, employment, vocational rehab, DBS, any kind of navigating through those process, community issues, service animals, protection advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security. So we kind of do soup to nuts on our team. Our other teams are systems reform, and they look for systemic issues. We have investigations. Investigations is just exactly as their name. They investigate abuse and neglect in facilities. And then we have our first team. And our first team are the individuals that when you call our 800 number, will do your intake. So they are the information gatherers for us. And that's our mission statement. And I'm jumping right into suspension, expulsion, arrest, and Baker Act. Those are the 4 areas that we're going to cover, because those are the 4 areas that we see in the common theme of behaviorally challenged problems, but we also cover positive behavior interventions, functional behavior assessments, things like that, and strategies. So let's move on. For your punishment, write 100 times. I will not waste my time on meaningless tasks. That's my personal opinion about suspension. We are a society who requests things to be data-driven and research-based. Yet there is no data to support that suspension cease that behavior that you're looking to extinguish. I personally think that suspension is a break, and it tends to reinforce that kind of behavior, and that's what I see with most of the students that I represent, is that the suspension is oftentimes given because they're experiencing a task avoidant behavior, and so we are reinforcing that behavior by giving them happy home time with mom. So we're going to go through a couple of scenarios, and I'm going to give you some information, and then you get to tell me what you think are the problems. Don't go ahead to the answer, please. And we'll work through the different topics. So in scenario 1, Timothy is a 3rd grader. Now Timothy is eligible for exceptional student ed in the state of Florida. He's had an outburst at school. He bit and kicked the school principal. The district suspended, and oh, by the way, this actually comes out of a real case, so I did not make these facts up. Not one of our cases, but it is actually a real case. The district suspended and unilaterally removed Timothy to an interim alternative education setting after the student allegedly violated the student code of conduct by striking others, including the principal, while acting out. The district notified the parents that special circumstances justified removing the student to the interim alternative education setting. Specifically, the district contended that because the student inflicted serious bodily injury upon the principal during the altercation, it could remove the student without conducting a manifestation determination. The parents appealed the district decision. So, what are the issues that you spot in here, and what would you think the outcome would be of this situation from your experience with students with behaviors?
They've got to determine that the behavior is unrelated to the diagnosed disability.
And they've accused him of committing serious bodily injury.
I would wonder if he's ever done anything previously and what the school's implemented already to support him, and if they haven't done proper steps in implementing things to help support him, like behavior intervention plans, then I would argue that as well.
And I would also wonder what started the situation. Why did he have this reaction to whatever happened?
All good answers. So,
What's a manifestation determination?
so glad you asked me. I have a slide just for that, so we are definitely going to cover that. So the answer in that particular case, the hearing officer explained that while the existence of special circumstances can justify removal to an interim alternative education setting, we love acronyms in special ed, so that's the AIES, for up to 45 school days, regardless of whether the student's conduct was a manifestation of the disability, those circumstances were not present in this case. The manifestation issue was moot because the district did not make a determination within 10 school days. The hearing officer cautioned that such a determination is necessary even in a case where the district opts to remove the student due to infliction of serious bodily injury. The district was also required to convene an IEP meeting for purposes of determining the interim alternative education setting. And I chose this case because it has a lot of issues that I see all the time, and the different ways that certain districts determine how that law applies. Now, I will tell you, I should have done my little disclaimer, I am an advocate and an attorney. People do not call me when things are going well. So, if I sound like, oh, all you're doing is talking about problems, well, no one calls and says, we're having a lovely IEP meeting, there'll be tea, please, you must join. They call us because the communication is broken down and they need us to help them navigate and to get the other side to hear what they're saying. So for those of you who may work with the district or are hardworking teachers, I am not putting down the work that teachers do. I'm just saying these are the situations we see. So in a case where a child whose behavior impedes the child's learning, IDEA states that behavior intervention plans must focus on the positive behavior. So we see a lot of positive behavior intervention plans that are very punitive. So they'll have restraint and seclusion put in them. Restraint and seclusion, for a moment on my soapbox, is not a positive behavior intervention. It is a crisis intervention, and it should not be ever included on a positive behavior intervention plan. So when a behavior impedes the student's ability to gain educational benefit and make meaningful progress, a functional behavior assessment needs to be conducted. So get in a manifestation, you need 2 slides. Discipline of students with disabilities. A student with a disability can be suspended. We get a lot of phone calls that say, they suspended my child illegally, but a student with a disability can still be suspended, and up to 10 days without a concern for a change of placement. It's once we reach the 11th day, consecutively or cumulatively, the manifestation determination needs to be conducted. So we'll get a call, Johnny's been suspended for 3 days, and my first question will always be, how many days has he been suspended this school year? Well, just the 3, but you have to hear why. And it's not that I don't care why, it's just that unfortunately what we call the 10 fate-free days can happen irregardless of whether it was a manifestation of the child's disability, and oftentimes we'll hear that's not fair. And I will quote my mother when I was 5 years old and I told her that something wasn't fair. She came back and told me, life's not fair, whoever told you life was. So, speaking for my mom, that is one of the things that is just not fair, but unfortunately that is the way it goes. So a manifestation determination is a review that should be conducted by members of the IEP team. It should be conducted by people who know the student and understand how that behavior impedes that child and how that behavior affects the child. Some school districts have like 100 people standing around, and some of them know the child, some of them is the dean of discipline or the dean of students or the dean of whatever grade you're in, and have no idea that this is an individual with a disability. First thing we do is we request records. I want to see everything that this child has generated, psychologicals, referrals, behavior plans, IEPs, progress reports, all of that information. And we want to go back a few years because oftentimes there's a pattern that everyone has missed. We look at a behavior as sometimes a child choosing not to behave, but the behavior is a method of communication. And we don't often see the big picture unless we look at it. I had a young man who was constantly getting suspended in reading. Well, reading was a non-preferred task. He was reading below grade level. Reading was also after lunch. Lunch was a time where everyone got to be all wild and crazy. And then the medication that the child was on was starting to wane. So that compounded the issue. When we looked at it, we were able to advocate for the student to have their reading class first in the day where the medication was working better, and also not after lunch when they were kind of riled up and going. So when you do a manifestation determination review, as I said, it should be the members of the IEP team, and there are only 2 questions that are relevant. I kid you not, I attended a manifestation determination review, and they must have had 100 documents or 100 pages, and they kept going through all of this, and I'm like, I'm about this much patient, and I kept saying, but there's only 2 questions. When are we getting to this? We have a process, Miss Siegel. We're going through the process. And I'm like, okay. It seemed like a few more hours. We were in this meeting for several hours, and I kept saying, well, when are we going to get to the 2 questions? Because I understand you have a process, but the law says there are really only 2 questions that are relevant. And those 2 questions are, if the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct and substantial relationship to the student's disability. That is not the student's label or eligibility. That is how that student with that disability is impacted. So we hear things like, a student with SLD doesn't have behaviors. Really? Because it's just hunky-dory to be struggling to do the same work as your peer next to you, but it takes you 4 times longer, and it's not frustrating. So it's the impact of that disability on that student. It is not the eligibility label. And if the conduct in question is a direct result of the LEA, which is your local education agency, which is your principal and your staffing specialist and the school staff's failure to implement the individual education plan. And that is why your IEPs need to be done with specificity. I will tell you, I see IEPs from around the state, and I see present levels of performance that are 3 sentences. How can I possibly know what your child needs in 3 sentences? I don't know them. I don't live with them. You do. You're the expert. So I should be able to pick up every child's IEP and know exactly what level that student's performing in and exactly what that student needs to gain educational benefit. If you have a present level of performance that is 3 sentences long, I know nothing about your child. One of our requirements when we accept a case is that you send the IEP for me to review. And I look through it because oftentimes it's a dispute about services, and I check to see if the service is there. I have parents calling because they're upset because they're not getting a service. And I end up going through the IEP and going, I don't know why this child would need this. It's not specific. If the service is not delineated with specificity, if they get speech, I need to know for how long, in what setting, how many minutes, and with whom. So there's a lot of things that need to go in your IEP for your child, so don't rush the process. If you have to reconvene, you have to reconvene. But 1-hour meetings, we can't even get through the introduction. So don't give me an IEP meeting for 1 hour. That's not going to work. It needs to have a good chunk of time so we can draft an appropriate plan.
Good question.
Sure.
Does this also pertain to
504s, what does it pertain, the manifestation or?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
With accommodation, they have accommodations too, but
Yes.
it's not on repeat.
So students with disabilities under Section 504 of the Rehab Act have 504 plans, and yes, they should still do manifestation determinations. They shouldn't be just removed from school and change of placement. So there is a process also for the 504s, and different districts, of course, do it differently. But, so, those are the 2 manager questions. And if one of them is a yes, you don't need both, then it is deemed a manifestation of the student's disability. The student then would remain in that classroom unless, of course, the parent, and that's important, unless, of course, the parent and the school agree to change placement. And we see a lot of schools that are just changing placement. So the MD, manifestation determination of the student, I said, is not about eligibility. And a student cannot be suspended or change of placement, can only take place if parent and student agree. We see a lot of kids getting moved anyway. We see a lot of schools saying, well, we obviously can't meet Johnny's needs here. We're moving him to home instruction. We have a lot of kids who are on home instruction without parental agreement. And if, again, it's a manifestation, the kid stays where they are, and then we need to look at what services do we need to bring in. I brought up in this special circumstances. They were trying to say that this issue was a special circumstance, and that's why there was a 45-day removal. Special circumstances in our state are if a student carries or possesses a weapon at school or a school function. We're talking about a weapon, not a picture of a weapon. Knowingly possesses or uses illegal drugs or sells at school or a school function. That is a prescription if it's not prescribed to that student. That is, in some school districts, well, obviously any kind of illegal drug, or has inflicted serious bodily injury. There is a definition to serious bodily injury, and you would not believe how many times I see them misapply serious bodily injury. So, the serious bodily injury is a bodily injury which involves a substantial risk of death, extreme physical pain, protracted and obvious disfigurement, or protracted loss or impairment of the function of a bodily member, organ, or mental faculty. It is not me grabbing your shirt and holding on your sleeve. I know cotton breathes, but that does not create serious bodily injury. I have had people say, he kicked me. I am not condoning kicking. It's obviously an inappropriate behavior, and we shouldn't have that happen. We need to do a functional behavior assessment and do a positive behavior plan, but that does not rise to the level of serious bodily injury, even if it is on a principal. And so we have a lot of cases where we end up going back in and getting the student moved back into class and asking for compensatory education because they've been sent home without, in some school districts, without any instruction. or instruction in a virtual program that does not meet the student's unique needs. I'm going to move on to expulsion and scenario 2.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Serious bodily injury, if somebody required like a couple stitches from that, would then that be?
Let me go back to it. Extreme physical pain, protracted and obvious disfigurement, protracted loss, impairment. See, we get a lot of times, we had to file a workman's comp claim. And I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that, but that's not serious bodily injury. I mean, it could be, it's depending on, I guess, the serious nature of the stitches and where the stitches took place.
But just somebody having stitches as a result doesn't necessarily.
It doesn't meet my definition.
Okay.
And it doesn't seem to meet the definition under Title 18 of the United States Code. So if a student has inflicted serious bodily injury, the student could have been placed in the alternative setting, but for not more than 45 days. We have another case right now where they've moved the kid for a year and a half. That exceeds the 45-day rule. Okay, expulsions. Expulsion is Johnny, our second grade student with ADHD, who's also eligible for exceptional student ed. He has a history of violent and eloping behaviors. Johnny is in a classroom for students with therapeutic needs. Emotional behavioral disorder is his eligibility. The school has attempted to revise his BIP and his IEP. Johnny's behavior, keyword was attempted. Johnny's behaviors have worsened. Johnny stabbed a classmate in the head with a pencil and wrapped his headphones around the neck of when his teacher stopped him from exiting the classroom through a second-story window. The principal determined Johnny was a threat to himself and others and expelled Johnny from school. So, anybody want to take a stab at some of the, I know that was a bad pun. Take a stab.
Johnny, my child, nobody else's.
By the way, this is also from a real case. I did not make these. I don't have to make facts up. I could sit here all day and discuss stories.
I have a question. Was the teacher following the behavioral plan?
That is a very good
I'm a teacher. I'm asking. I'm a parent of a child who has severe aggressive tendencies and gets in a lot of trouble. But I am also a teacher in public school. And there are some of us teachers, like myself, who follow these plans very carefully and ask for them to be tweaked when needed. And there are other teachers that, don't. Or follow them to the degree at which they are trained, because many teachers aren't trained in this. So my question with this would be, is it being followed? Because if it's not being followed, then
yeah.
And that's on the school, right?
And that's what we see a lot of times. We see that there is this beautiful behavior intervention plan that should be in the Smithsonian. It's worded so well, but nobody's following it. And nobody sometimes even knew it existed. And then, or
that
we
has
knew
happened.
it was
I've seen that happen, yeah.
We knew it existed, but nobody was trained on how to implement it. So these are the problems we see. So the district denied the second grader with ADHD FAPE by failing to provide the student, thank you. I'm like sitting up here going, is it just me or is it the room? By failing to provide the student with educational service after he was expelled 3 times.
Just real quick, so you just said a lot of times there's these beautiful plans and they're not being implemented or they're unknown. So as parents, how do we change that portion? How do we make sure or monitor that they're being implemented and or known?
Well, here's the first clue. If you have a child who got a behavior intervention plan and you see that they're still receiving referrals for the behavior that is the target behavior, then I'm going to tell you there's a good chance that behavior intervention plan is not being followed or is not appropriate. So we need to reconvene a meeting and we need to address it, because just like an IEP, BIPs are living, breathing documents.
Okay.
We also sometimes see behaviors get worse before they get better, because if you're starting to now focus on correcting this, but this has worked for me, and now you want me to change my behavior.
Right.
So it does sometimes escalate, and I tell parents, be prepared. You may get a few more calls. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but it should get better. And if it's not getting better, that's your clue. And if you're still receiving this or you're asking, some people meet monthly on their BIPs. Some people have to meet every 2 weeks with the team to determine if the BIP is working. Request the data to come home, because you use data to make the plan, but you still have to take data to make sure that the plan is working. Because if we have a great plan, but it's not something that Johnny's going to buy into, then it's the wrong plan for him. So,
And then do I physically make copies of this and distribute them to the staff, or?
they should all have copies. You
Yeah, I
shouldn't
should.
have to
There
be making the
there
copies.
should be a lot of things
They
going
should
on,
be
but-
doing that. Yeah.
I'm a school counselor as well,
Mhm.
and one thing that I've noticed is that I'm only high school now, and I know some of you have younger in high school. As they go to high school, still will them in, because now that you're dealing with 7 teachers, 6 teachers, and maybe like 1 or 2 is following, you have 4 other ones who may not be following, and then the issue that we run into with our exceptional ed students is that they fail. And once they fail, now we have to go back and figure out how did this student fail your course if you're following the accommodations. And I noticed one parent, she was on it. You have to stay on it.
Mhm.
One teacher had to go back the whole semester and give him work, because somewhere in there, he can say he was giving accommodations. If you're giving accommodations, this student should not fail your class. So if you have 10 questions and he has accommodations, Johnny should only be doing 2 questions. Even if you draw a line and say, Johnny's only going to do 2 questions, because when we do the meeting, that teacher has to show evidence that they have been given those accommodations that's located on that IEP. And the teachers get a little flustered, but what I've learned to tell the teachers at the beginning of the school year, pull all your IEPs to the side and look at per period who's in your class, because it does get a little overwhelming, especially on the high school level. But the parent, you have copies of the IEP, you have copies of everything. When they go to different schools, we request it from you, not from the district, if you go from district to district. So make copies of every IEP,
Well,
every
yes,
meeting.
you should have copies of all your child's records. I am a stickler for when we work with parents trying to set up a method. We do it like we do our case files. So you have to have your IEPs and your reports and all of that. If you're having, what I recommend and what I used to do is you have school starting, the week before school starts, you ask for a meeting to meet with the teachers. If that's 1 teacher or there's 7 teachers, you still meet with all of the teachers. It doesn't have to be hours long, but here's my child's IEP. And I wrote a little 2-page summary on knowing my child. I did this personally, so I'm not, this is what worked. Because you can't judge a child by a label. So this individual has autism. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Right.
The spectrum is like amazingly wide, and not everybody does it. So I may be trained on strategies for children with autism, and it may have worked beautifully for Peter last year, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for Sally this year. We have to remember that everyone's still an individual, and we sometimes forget that. And like we have this, like Felix the cat, our bag of tricks. And you just got to keep going back in and trying. If this doesn't work, let me move this up. But give it time and take data. If you come to an IEP meeting and you show up and all you have is a Starbucks coffee in your hand, I am immediately on alert that you are not taking data and you are not monitoring my client. Because you should come in with a binder. And I should know exactly what you're doing on the behavior intervention plan, what you're doing on the goals. I want to see work samples. If your kids are not getting work samples at home, what are they doing all day? Typically developing kids bring home work samples. So you should be seeing work samples. There should be homework. There should be signs of life. If you're not getting that, then what are they doing all day? As a parent, you can request to observe, go in the classroom, observe. When I used to go in the classroom and observe, I changed the dynamic. It's like I could not walk into the classroom and be seen by my child and not have my child already be like, okay, teacher, I no longer listen to you because my mom's in the room now, so I listen. So I tried not to do that, but then you can send in agency providers. CARD would go in and do observations. There are different agency providers that can go in and do that. The advocates that work on our team will go in and do an observation of a student if we cannot figure out what's going on. And it is amazing because I have gone into classrooms and I have seen somebody try to implement something they weren't doing before, and none of the kids in the classroom are like, what is this? We've never done this before. So kids are brutally honest. So you know right there's no faking it for a child. If they're not used to this routine and now all of a sudden I'm going to pretend that I'm, this is what we do every day, guys, and they're like, they can't follow it. So I love that about kids. They don't fake it.
Just quick clarification. So that meeting a week before school started, that's not an IEP meeting. That is just you're calling a meeting with the teachers.
I call it with all of the teachers, and if there's related service providers to be available to know this is my child, this is what their IEP says. And I will tell you, open house was really funny for my husband and I. We would show up at open house and think about it. Now, you know that I'm an attorney, so my child's in your class. Like, I'm not going to be monitoring the IEP. My husband would walk in and say, hi, I'm so-and-so's father. Have you read her IEP? Here's a copy. So it's like, here we go again. Now we're reinforcing that you need to make sure you're doing the plan. Because it was written for a reason and there was a lot of specifics put into that and thought. So it is the same thing with behavior intervention plans. So a student who would have been removed is going to potentially be owed compensatory education for the time they were removed, and we asked for hour, because we do get a lot of, well, we're doing one-on-one, and that's, well, you know what, we're trying to remedy where that child would have been but for that violation. Yes?
Is there somewhere where we can find or access like a mock-up behavior intervention plan that is really written the way it should be? Because I've seen a lot that are not written very well, and I would like to have something more to say, like, okay, well, what about this, or adding different pieces in. So if there was like a sample or like mock-up one, that would be so incredibly helpful.
That's a good idea. That's something we could put on our website. But I will tell you right now, what you do need to look for is, are we addressing the target behaviors? There's no such thing as we only address one behavior a year. We address the behaviors that impede the gaining of educational benefit. We don't do, there's nothing in the law that says one a year. So it would need to be addressing the behavior. You would need to know, well, I'll kind of give you all of that when I get into the behavior intervention plan. But no, these are very good questions. So, and we're getting right there. So in that case, they did owe the child comp ed. And a functional behavior assessment. You need to observe and gather the data, or the data, however you say it. I'm from New York, so. What is the function of that behavior? FBAs need to be data-based. Review of records, referrals, discipline reports, observations. All behavior has a function. Is it task avoidance? Is it frustration? Communication. We have a lot of students who are nonverbal or have limited verbal ability. When does it occur? Is there a pattern? Reading issues and meds, like I used before. What caused the behavior? There is an antecedent. If I had a dime for every time I said, and for no reason at all, Johnny decided to do this, I could be retired right now. Because there was something. There was a reason for that behavior. Something set Johnny off. He didn't just go 0 to 60 for the fun of it. He did it for a reason. So we need to look at that reason and we need to address it. Components of the behavior plan, of the FBA really. Identify and describe the target behavior. There may be more than one. We do have a district in this state that says they only address one. And we've had this issue with them and we are working to educate them. Indirect assessments, review of events, data analysis. Look at the strength of the student. You have to have buy-in. Reinforcement, determination, and hypothesis. If you have the wrong hypothesis, how are you going to create the right plan? I've had people say, well, we just put that down, but don't worry about that. And I'm like, well, I just remember back from school when I was writing a paper, if my theory, my hypothesis was wrong, my whole paper was not going to be correct. So, now we're going to address the positive behavior intervention plan, and you need to address the target behaviors. A target behavior is one that interferes with the student's ability to make meaningful progress in the curriculum and to achieve the student's individual education plan goals. Once a target behavior is identified and the hypothesis is developed, a positive behavioral intervention plan can be prepared to address the target behaviors with strategies and interventions if necessary, or the target behavior can be addressed by using a more informal approach. So best practices involve the student, the parent, legal guardian. I oftentimes see these really great plans and the student has no buy-in. The student must have buy-in and the plan must be realistic.
I don't understand what you mean by buy-in.
Okay, so we're going to reward you for doing something well,
Got it.
but I'm going to give you stickers.
Okay.
And you're 17 years old.
Right.
And now everyone in school is going to bully you because you're a kid with a gold star on your desk. You know, it's got to be something, and it's got to be creative. They do inventory lists of what are your kids' interests, what will motivate them to do this. Oftentimes it is working on the computer or doodling on a piece of paper. But it has to be something that the student buys into, something the student wants to work in to help with that behavior. Because I had a kid who used to like to have Monster energy drinks at the end of the school day. Yes.
I just kind of wanted to address what she said. When I write my plans with my students, so we talk about it ahead of time, and they will tell you what they need to work on. They know. They probably know better than you do. They don't like to talk about it. It makes them uncomfortable, but I will ask them. And I have had kids request odd things. I teach 3rd grade. I had kids request my old worksheets that I'm going to throw away so they can play school at home with their sister as a reward. So if they have a good day, they want my old math worksheets. Things I would never think of. Mostly they want time. They want to be with the teacher and eat lunch with the teacher, eat with the PE coach, have mom come to school and eat. Usually they want people, time with people. But I have had some things that I would have never thought a kid would want. And they do. And most parents don't want you to do the candy, which is what a teacher's automatically going to do because we have an excess of candy and stickers. And that's not what, that doesn't help the situation. That just adds to the fire.
Yeah, and oftentimes too, there are just natural built-in stuff. Like I want to be line leader. I want to be the helper.
Right.
The student wants the recognition because all the time, the only time they're ever getting attention is when they're acting out. So if I am acting out, seeking attention, then if you give me attention for doing well, that's going to reinforce me and I'm less likely to act out. So those kind of things are really good ideas. We look at positive interventions and what happens when this happens. We'll identify the student's modeling of appropriate behaviors, catch the student doing well, praise them from that, train all the staff that comes into contact with that student, monitor and provide with fidelity, and expect things, as I said before, usually intensify before they get better.
Now, for a behavior intervention plan, I've seen somewhere it's written, I've seen this multiple times, like the student will use their coping skills when they get frustrated. But it doesn't relate to who's teaching them coping skills, who's prompting them to use their coping skills.
What are their coping skills?
What are they? Do they know what their coping skills are? So is part of that behavior intervention plan like the steps in helping the child get there? Or
Yeah, we
who's
would want to
helping the
know
child?
what the coping skills are. So then we look back at the IEP. There should be a goal for coping skills and a strategy. And I know in IEPs we don't write every little step down, but I ask, what are you doing? Because we want to use it at home. Because we want this across all settings so that the student is getting rewarded in the same manner and everything is across the board even. Because you don't want to be rewarding the kid for inappropriate behaviors at home and, expecting this. So we all need to be on the same page, and oftentimes my clients have home behavioralists, so we like to get them involved in it. and make sure that everybody's working the plan. And then when you get a plan, I want everyone trained on it. From the lunch lady to, you know, I want everyone to know. And since we are a state that insists on resource officers in schools, and I won't get into that debate, but I will say I want the resource officer to know. It's not a matter of I want to breach confidentiality of my client, but I want everybody reinforcing on the same page. And if you have a substitute, the plan needs to be there for the substitute, because usually where we find things break down is, oh, we had a sub that week. So, yeah, everyone on the same page. Arrests. So, poor Joe's a middle school student, eligible under other health impaired, had numerous psychiatric hospitalizations. He was placed in a self-contained classroom in a center school. He received counseling. He assaulted 4 district employees on the same day. The district sought to change his placement, but the parents would not agree. The district reported the assault to the juvenile authorities, and the parents initiated a due process complaint. Unfortunately, we see this an awful lot of bringing in law enforcement on behaviors that were manifestations of students' disability, things that when I was a kid, and I know I'm dating myself, I would have been sent to the principal would have called my mother, I would have the fear of God in me, and that would nip that in the bud because I didn't want to go home and face my mom and dad. So they're moving away from that. We're seeing a lot more law enforcement and criminalizing of manifestations, and I personally think that is the wrong way to go. Also, it reinforces that the student's not wanted, and we're now kicking a child who may have been craving attention to the curb.
Do you think that comes because of the general broad policy of discipline behaviors in the Gen Ed school, from the school board district down, that they feel like, oh, what, we can't hold it out for one, but if everybody else has to be held to that standard. So it's a mismatch of their understanding, you know, because like it's hard sometimes to even get past the principal, the gatekeeper.
Well, there's a code of conduct and a discipline matrix. But what I have found personally from doing this for so many years is students with disabilities tend to be suspended, expelled, and arrested, and Baker acted at a greater number than their non-disabled peers. So I personally don't understand why our clients are under a microscope. So, and we also have found that many of the students receive a higher consequence. So if there's a range of 3 to 7 days, our clients are always getting 7. I'm like, what happened to 3? Oh no, he was really bad. And I'm like, yeah. You know, but there is no really bad child. There's just inappropriate behaviors. And it goes to a lot of educating, and we go to this whole mentality of, well, we have to show everybody else that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior, because if they see him get away with it, then everyone's going to do it. And that's not necessarily what we're finding. So we go back and say you have to do the manifestation determination. Our clients have procedural safeguards and protections, and we have to do a lot of that. We're seeing an increase in disciplinary actions, because everybody's concerned about what's happened recently with the school shootings, and so everyone is trying to target that. My personal belief is we need more behavioral health services in schools. I don't think that solving the problem is by getting more police officers involved. I think we need to get more therapists and behavioralists involved, because there is a function to this behavior. These things don't happen overnight. As I said before, there's a pattern, and it takes somebody going back and looking at it to coming up with finding where did we miss the signs. And unfortunately, sometimes there's like these neon glaring signs and nobody looked. It happens a lot when kids move around, but I've seen it happen in schools where the kid has been there consistently, and nobody wanted to deal with this problem. It's not fun, and we kick the can down the road, and it just makes a child act out more and more and more. So in this case, the parents alleged the district did not provide a continuum of placements, and should have classified the student as a student with a serious emotional disturbance, failed to refer, evaluate, and identify the student in an appropriate and timely manner, failed to provide an appropriate placement for many years, violated the stay put provisions, and failed to provide the student with extended year services. We call it ESY in our district, extended school year, and occupational therapy, and impermissibly reported the student's 2 violent acts on district personnel to the state juvenile authorities. The parent sought reimbursement for the cost of various hospitalizations, and the district requested an order requiring the student and his parents to submit to family and individual counseling with the school district. Interesting. So, the hearing officer concluded that the school had a right to report the incidents and did not have control over whether charges were filed. The reporting of these incidents did not create the change of placement. The district was advised that the school should have informed the juvenile authorities that it was a student with disabilities and that the incidents were related to the student's disability. I've had a lot of school resource officers tell us after the fact, well, if we had known that that was a student with a disability, we would have handled this differently. And so then we get, well, we didn't say anything because we didn't want to violate FERPA. Like, now we're worried about my client's rights? How about worrying about them before we get them arrested? So, the district erred when it failed to change the student's classification from other health impaired. I will tell you personally, it doesn't matter what the eligibility is. Services are based on the student's needs, not on the student's eligibility. If anyone ever sits in a meeting and says, well, we don't give that to students with SLD, that's the wrong answer. You have to look at the unique needs of that student and how their disability impacts them.
How do you address that when they say that to you? Because I've heard that a lot. Not for my kid, but I've heard them say it to my students' parents before. How do you address that?
Personally, I go, wrong answer. I said, that's not how it works. The law is very clear. We address the student based on their unique needs, not on their label. And ESC, Exceptional Student Ed, is a foot in the door to the world of special education services. So you have to treat your child as you get them. So, because we have clients who have multiple disabilities, but one eligibility. So that's why, again, the IEP needs to be written with specificity. I need to pick up your kid's IEP and know exactly what their strengths are and what their weaknesses is, because I don't have the benefit of living with them. So I need to know that. So I expect everyone who's now gone to this training are going to have much longer IEP meetings to make sure that all of their unique needs are there. And you take those strengths and you work on those strengths to help that child get through and build those weaknesses to strengths. So
if they have multiple disabilities,
mm-hmm.
and like for my son, they put autism as his, which is
primary
disability, but he has disruptive mood dysregulation, which is like bipolar, and that is what gets him in trouble more than anything else. And they just kind of put it in the notes. You know what I mean? Like in the note section of the IEP,
mm-hmm.
not necessarily where I feel like it needs to be.
I'm going to tell you, notes are great. I love notes.
But it needs to be
but
bigger.
The notes are not the meat and potato of the IEP. Your present level of performance drives your supports and services and your goals and objectives. So while I like notes, and not every district does it, but notes are just minutes, they are not the legally binding part. You need to have that in your present level of performance, because when you go in and you do your manifestation determination, that's Exhibit 1. Look, all over here that these were the student's needs. Look at Exhibit 2. Positive Behavior Intervention Plan said this is what we were targeting. So yeah, you can have one eligibility. We will not go in and fight for a string of eligibilities, because we will tell you that is your door into the service, and now you need to make sure your IEP reads for what your child's unique needs are. So, so they did get dinged on the lack of classification, and the district failed to conduct a complete evaluation. My buzzword is, when you're requesting an evaluation, you want a complete and comprehensive evaluation to uncover all of your child's potential disabilities. And again, it's not to gather up lots of labels, it's to know how that child is impacted by their disability. So the district also failed to timely refer the student for evaluation. The district acknowledged the student's problems beginning back in first grade. So they did nothing until the student was hospitalized over a period of time, and then the district did not have a required continuum of placements. We see that a lot in our small rural districts. We have 2 elementary schools, 1 middle and 1 high. I need a therapeutic placement for my client. That is their LRE at the time. And they're in crisis mode. We need to stabilize and then move back into gen ed. We don't have that here. So we put everyone in the alternative setting. No, that's for disciplinary issues. That is not for a student who needs therapeutic needs. All school districts must have a continuum of services. So the district did not have the required continuum of placements. The district failed to examine whether the student required extended year services due to the student's behavioral needs. The student, by the way, also needed OT to address tactile defensiveness and social skills deficits. The district was advised that if it could arrange for counseling by a counselor chosen by the parents. So remember, they wanted to be able to pick the counselor. That was off the table. That did not happen. So the behavior plan was determined to be inappropriate, and the district needed to conduct an appropriate assessment and develop an appropriate behavior intervention plan. There was no violation of stay put with the juvenile justice referral. So, and they were ordered to pay some of the hospitalizations for the child since they had denied the student a free and appropriate public education. Unfortunately, the law does allow for students to be referred to law enforcement agencies, but they cannot do this in a discriminatory manner. You can't just only send kids who have disabilities to see the SRO. So reporting a crime committed by a child with a disability must ensure that copies of the special education and disciplinary records of the child are transmitted for consideration by the appropriate authorities. Appropriate authorities, say that 3 times fast. So, and the school must transmit copies in accordance with FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So they just need to ask for parental permission. I get all the time, well, we didn't do it because we didn't want to tell the police you was a student with a disability and violate FERPA. Well, we also don't want our students being referred to disciplinary, and I'm sure the parents would have provided consent. So these are just some numbers of students who with disabilities in Florida that were referred to law enforcement. Yes?
When you do a decision, make a decision, or when a decision happens based on your advocacy and legal work, can be overturned by a counsel from DOE?
What kind of decision?
Or are these decisions legal things that have happened?
These cases that I'm talking about were actually cases that went through hearing level.
Okay.
So DOE can't overturn a administrative law judge. We're not a tier 2. We're just a tier 1. Yeah. So the only so if we go to administrative law, which we have to go to an administrative hearing, you have to exhaust your administrative remedies. You can't run into federal court. You can't go to state court.
Okay.
So we exhaust our administrative remedies, and let's just say we prevail, because we like to prevail. But the school district doesn't like that decision. They can then appeal it to federal or state. But they can't just, DOE can't just come in and say, I don't know what they were thinking. So they can't. So the U.S. incarcerates juveniles unequally, and as a result, improvements have bypassed some of our children, particularly in the area of racial, ethnic, and disability. Prevalent studies have found that 65 to 70% of youth in the justice systems meet the criteria for students with a disability. There's a handout for you in the back that has all of this down, so if you didn't get it when you start. And additionally, at least 75% of youth in the juvenile justice system have experienced some kind of trauma. So Baker Act is my final scenario, and one that I have quite an issue with, because I believe personally, again, these are my personal beliefs, that it is misused and it is an end run. There is a process to Baker Act, and I understand the need, but I often see that it is not understood and we use it inappropriately. So Sam is 8 years old and has been diagnosed as having autism and is nonverbal. The student is in a self-contained classroom and does not have a behavior intervention plan, as the school has a school-based plan. Sam is consistently acting out when it is math center time, as math is a non-preferred activity. The aide in the classroom is attempting to instruct Sam, but he refuses to complete his work. The aide takes away Sam's fidget, those little fidget, because he refuses to complete the math classwork. Sam becomes aggressive and knocks the books off the desk and starts to throw items in the classroom. The aide and one other classroom assistant placed Sam in a restraint, and he continued to attempt to hit and kick the aides. They stopped the restraint after he calms down. He starts a tantrum when the aide refuses to return his fidget, which he utilizes when he becomes overstimulated. The teacher calls the resource officer into the classroom, and the student is placed in handcuffs and taken in for involuntary commitment. Happens all the time, unfortunately. So, there's several different issues there that we see. First one we start with is the school should have conducted a functional behavior assessment and drafted a positive behavior intervention plan. These need to be unique to the student. School-wide plans do not work for your individual needs. Sam is nonverbal and behavior is a form of communication. The teacher should have provided math instruction. Why was that aide teaching? Aides are not teachers, and when I have somebody call and ask for an aide, I need an aide for instructional purposes, they are not there for instructional purposes. They are there to reinforce and provide supports and services. But the teacher is the one who has the certifications, the trainings, the degree. The teacher should have provided the math instruction. The aides are not certified. The aide utilized negative consequences rather than positive behavior intervention strategies when taking away the fidget, when Sam which he utilizes for sensory issues. The staff should have utilized de-escalation techniques. They conducted a restraint and did not file a report with the Florida Department of Education, nor did they provide the parent with required reports. The school must notify the parent each time a restraint is used and shall also provide the parent and guardian with a completed incident report in writing. So there were multiple problems. And
Is that also true of private schools?
I don't do private schools because IDEA does not follow you into a private school. So those federal protections do not go into the private school, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So we only handle cases in public schools because private schools you're contracting for services. So they could promise you the world, but they're not under the IDEA.
I know a lot of kids run in STEP, which is a state-funded scholarships. I was wondering if it would pertain to the same state-funded scholarship for private schools.
Yes, and just like McKay, but it doesn't make them public schools. Those dollars don't click in. You could look in whether they take federal funding in other areas to see if Section 504 of the Rehab Act applies, but we just strictly handle kids in public schools. Okay, so while a person cannot be Baker acted for dangerous behavior resulting from autism, a law enforcement may have reason to believe the person has a mental illness. So my issue with that is if you look at the criteria for an involuntary commitment, the person is supposed to have a mental illness. Autism is not considered a mental illness. It's a developmental disability. It's a neurological disorder. It doesn't quite fall into that. I see a lot of kids with the ASD label getting Baker acted. It doesn't mean there's not a comorbid mental health issue, but I see them misusing Baker Act. So,
And if they don't have a behavioral, back on the answer part, you said that they needed to have a behavioral kind kind of like plan.
Mhm.
Is that something that the teacher, the school puts in, or is that something that the parent has to navigate or
No, the
petition
school,
for?
the IEP team should have determined this is a student that needs a behavior intervention plan. They should have conducted an FBA, and we should have had a BIB. All too often, I have clients Baker acted for manifestations of their disability, and behaviors that were not handled in accordance with their behavior intervention plan, which you brought up earlier.
But if there's not a behavior plan, then is that
That's a failure on the part of the school.
right?
So it
And
isn't.
the teacher doesn't come up with that, that's.
No, I said earlier, I think the best people to develop behavior intervention plans are the IEP team, because they have the information. I said that on manifestation determinations, but here's another interesting thing. Oftentimes, our parents would prefer a phone call, and they will have come in and they will help de-escalate. So we're just finding that they're not utilizing, and I'm not advocating for schools to send kids home to parents because they have a duty to provide free, appropriate public education. So I'm not saying call mom every time the kid acts out, but I'm saying if we're seriously considering a Baker Act, then we need to look at whether the student truly poses a potential threat to themselves and others. Not I'm flipping out because you took my fidget, so I'm throwing things, so I'm having a tantrum. And we see a lot of tantrum, kids getting Baker acted for tantrum, which is not appropriate. So when you look at the involuntary commitment, they talk about are there other willing family members or friends who could have provided that? And that's the piece that I see is missing. We just kind of jump in and he's acting up, he's a danger, he threw things. He could have done a lot of things, but he's not doing them. So if you're doing your appropriate de-escalation techniques, which should be in your behavior intervention plan, and it should be in your crisis management plan, this should not be happening.
And the SROs are usually the ones who are taking them to the facility, correct? So couldn't they be another front line that kind of really the school needs to work with to kind of be? I know that one school that I was at, they said if an officer is called, they have to, by law, Baker Act them, take them.
They have to meet criteria to be Baker acted, but in the first place, you should never be using your law enforcement as your behavior team. We see a lot of schools that don't have like crisis intervention teams and behavior teams, and they call the SRO.
Yeah.
They are not the person trained for that. They're a law enforcement officer. They are there to gauge whether a crime is being committed and do I arrest. They're not the people. So you should have trained staff in the school, and again, everyone should be trained on that child's individual behavior intervention so that we know, oh, he's doing this, we need to do this, we need to do that. When I look at some of those restraint and seclusion reports, I see the same canned answers and responses. What de-escalation techniques did you do? We told him to make good choices. Really? Because I am flipping out. And you're going to ask me to make good choices now? Because I'm not in the rational part of my brain. So there really needs to be a plan developed. But these are the things. I see these same canned answers over and over again, especially on the same kid. And it was like, it didn't work yesterday. What made you think it was going to work today? So it's kind of common sense stuff. But they have almost like, I wonder if some people just cut and paste the response into the report. I want to know what happened before. We usually don't see what happened before. It's always that miraculous, for no apparent reason, this child just went off and did this stuff. And everything was rosy. We were implementing the plan with fidelity. We were utilizing the behavior intervention plan, but the child decided to tear up the room. So, that is it. I thank you all. If I did run out of tickets, if you filled out a survey and you didn't get tickets, please go to the booth and let them know I sent you and that we owe you some tickets. And thank you all for coming. I
Thank you, Anne.
appreciate it. Thank you.